This is Good Morning Mumbai with HrishiK.
He was saying something and I've just attempted to quiet that down. Only because we're on air. The incredible Ashwin Sanghi is Keepers of the Kalachakra. Is in online as well as on-ground stores. It's really, the only way I can describe it is a typhoon of a novel. And here he is in studio. What's up? How are you?
It's always such a pleasure to see you, Rishi. I mean, somehow there are some interviews that I actually look forward to, and this was one of them.
Get prepared to be on camera through the interview now. So
Yeah.
we're online all across the nation on www.onecast.in, numeral 1cast.in, 94.3 on the FM band on your radio sets right in Mumbai City. Only if you're not driving. You're in the backseat of a radio taxi, you're at home or at work, you're in a chauffeur-driven car. Then if you want to see some video, we're streaming video live on facebook.com/radio1.mum, and we've tagged Ashwin Sanghi's official page. Now this, to me, is Matrix meets Mission Impossible meets Vipassana. Must have been your toughest book ever. I can't even imagine what it must have taken to research this. A couple of years?
Oh yeah, a little more than 2 years actually. But Rishi, actually it started with a very simple idea. We all have dreams, and sometimes our dreams are nightmares. And I ended up with a nightmare. And that nightmare, when I got up the next morning, sometimes you have a vivid recollection of what you dreamt, and sometimes you don't. But it seemed very, very real, exceptionally real. So I spoke to my wife and I said, Anu, I mean, the dream was so real, that nightmare was so real, that I was wondering to myself in the morning that could that have been my real life? Is that my real life? And could the life that I'm living, for example, the interview that I'm giving you, could this be my illusion? Could what happens when I switch off be my reality? And once I started thinking about that, it led me to that entire idea of duality and quantum entanglement. And I'm not a scientist, Rishi. A ton of time to be able to get my head around that, because I needed to depend on many, many friends to actually take me through Quantum Theory 101 so that I could actually attempt writing this book. So yes, it was a long slog.
Yeah. There is this underlying vein of spirituality, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it does start off with some high degree espionage.
Yes.
And the fact that there is a collaboration of sleuths or spies from 4 different nations, and it doesn't include the United Kingdom. And I have to ask you why. The Queen would be very upset.
She would
that
be
MI6
upset. She should actually ask the PM who created Brexit.
So IG4 is a collaboration of, Russian intelligence, Indian intelligence.
Yeah.
Well done on that. Some patriotic fervor coming in there, raw, which never gets its due. And of course, American intelligence and Chinese intelligence.
That's right.
So, the existing superpowers and the to-be superpowers. Explain that. Yeah.
That's right. The thought really was that, I mean, the sort of threats that are faced today globally are not in the nature of nation states. They are more in terms of ideologies. I mean, I have strongly always believed this, that it's very easy to kill a terrorist, but it's very difficult to kill the ideology that inspired the terrorist. And that is a far more difficult battle to fight. So in the long run, I do believe that the battle will have to be fought in terms of ideology. And many issues that are occurring today are no longer based on borders. They are based on overall global ideologies which are spreading and which are causing their own set of problems wherever they go. So the thought I had was that what if there was this secret, elusive sort of group which was attempting to actually cause polarization in the world, and you needed to find a way to neutralize that polarization. And wouldn't it be necessary for the greatest powers of the world to come together in order to be able to prevent that polarization? And so that is how the idea for IG4 was born. And of course, it's a little bit fantastical because after all, you would never imagine that the Chinese and the Americans are working together. But then, come on, for heaven's sake. I mean, the one qualification of a fiction writer is that a fiction writer has to be a bloody good liar.
Very well put. We're going to come back right after this Ghostbusters Ray Parker Jr. and chat with him about Keepers of the Kalachakra. More on that. Ashwin Sanghi in studio. Ray Parker Jr. from the original Ghostbusters film. Ashwin Sanghi is in studio. The conversation promises to be cerebral yet fun. And his Keepers of the Kalachakra is out on all online as well as on-ground stores. It's a fascinating read, to say the least, and more conversation.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with HrishiK.
Now, I would imagine normally Kalachakra is spelled with a K-double-A-L, but you've spelt it literally like Kalachakra.
Yes.
Explain that, and what really is the theory of the Kalachakra.
Well, first of all, in Sanskrit, most of the words, we have a silent A, right? So, I mean, we talk of Ram, we don't talk of Rama, but actually it's Rama. Similarly, it's Kala. The A is a little...
Like in the South, we do say the A, actually.
That's right. You do. Exactly. So the point is that if you take these two words, Kala and Chakra, what they translate to is Kal means time and Chakra means wheel. So literally speaking,
continuum.
It is the wheel of time. And of course, in Vajrayan Buddhism, the concept of Kalachakra is basically that you as an individual are sitting in this wheel of time, surrounded by all the elements, the entire universe. And the aim is to become one with that wheel of time. The aim is to become one with the universe, which is frankly what most meditation techniques have talked about, not just Buddhist meditation techniques. The connection of Kalachakra to what I have written about in this particular book is the idea that you could actually warp space and time when you get into the realm of quantum theory. And in quantum theory, there is this wonderful little concept which is known as quantum entanglement. What does quantum entanglement really mean? It means that you could have a isolated particle sitting in New Delhi, and you could have another one thousands of miles away in New York, and the two particles behave almost identically. In other words, if you were to, of course you can't do it practically, but theoretically, if you were to measure their spin, their velocity of the spin, you will find that they are identical. So the thought I had was that if you can have quantum entanglement at the very basic level, then what is to stop you from having a quantum entangled planet, or a quantum entangled weather system, or a quantum entangled human being? And that's really where Kalachakra is going.
Lovely. And every time, I've seen Matrix, and I continue to watch it when it's repeated on the television. And then I saw Christopher Nolan's Inception. And then, I go to Igatpuri, where they teach you Vipassana, which is a form of meditation.
Yes.
I suddenly realize that all these fancy notions of science fiction perhaps have their root in the Buddhist texts,
of course,
or in the Vedas, for example. And where they talk about the observer and the observed being one.
Absolutely. So, I mean, think about this. Within the realm of physics, we talk about duality, which is that anything can behave as a wave or as a particle. So this was from the original light experiment, that light behaves both as wave and particle. But subsequently, physicists discovered that you can actually pretty much have anything behaving as a wave or a particle. Now think about this. When we as humans come into the world, we think about our physical forms. Isn't that a particle form? And then when we go out of this world, we get converted into souls. Isn't that soul fundamentally a wave form? So actually you can find all the little intricacies of science blending in beautifully with the intricacies of philosophy. And that's what, frankly, Rishi, fascinates me, because I've always believed that, people say, oh, you're fundamentally a religious writer or a historical writer. But religion per se doesn't really interest me that much, because philosophy is exciting. Philosophy is about questions that can never be answered. And religion, on the other hand, is about answers that can never be questioned. So, I would much rather talk about philosophy than about religion.
www.onecast.in, online all over the nation. That's numeral 1cast.in, 94.3 on the FM band and your radio sets right here in Mumbai City. Only if you're not driving. A statutory warning, we're streaming some video live on Facebook at HRISHIKAY. We've tagged Ashwin Sanghi's page. Go check it out. Taylor Swift, Shake It Off, back in a couple of minutes. Taylor Swift, Shake It Off, 9:30 in the morning. Keepers of the Kalachakra have been sold, and this one promises to up that number. It's really amazing. And if you haven't read the Rosebud line, Chanakya's Chang, the Krishna Keys, the Sialkot saga, you can start afresh, because this really is a story of its own. More conversation with Ashwin.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with HrishiK.
Also, the fact that, here's a story that has espionage on one side and spirituality on the other side. And the fact that there is a research facility, and that research facility is being funded by a conglomerate of very wealthy and powerful people around the world called the Minerva.
Correct.
Again, that's something out of for the lack of anything else, out of a Ludlum novel.
More like a Dan Brown novel.
Dan Brown novel. But yes, we do know now,
yes,
that the moderates are slowly and steadily, I don't know whether I can use the word being bumped off,
yes,
not in the literal sense of the term,
yes,
but they're being relegated.
Absolutely.
The hardliners,
that's right,
and the radicals have come to the fore, and they're being surrounded and supported by these incredibly wealthy people with their own agendas.
Absolutely.
And all of that is mirrored,
yes,
in Keepers of the Kalachakra.
Of course. You know, to a very great extent, if you really look at the entire world post World War II, it was the rise of the liberals. All the concepts that we today hold close to our heart, whether it is in terms of secularism, whether it's in terms of freedom of expression, whether it's in terms of gay and lesbian rights, whether it's in terms of equality of the genders, whether it's in terms of freedom of worship, all of these concepts are things which were promoted by liberals throughout the world, and that's the reason why you had so much of the world eventually developing into democracies. The problem that we have, of course, is that unfortunately liberals somewhere they tended to disregard what was going on in other parts of the world where these value systems were no longer prevalent. In that sense, I call these illiberal liberals. And the problem with that, of course, is that, in other words, you're wanting to promote a certain set of values within your own country, but are willing to look the other way when it comes down to other countries. And I think that is what has resulted in the rise of a much more extremist voice from the other side. Those extremist voices are saying that, listen, guys, you are hypocrites. And unfortunately, the sound that is blocked out is that of the moderate voice. So you have extreme positions on the right and the left, but the moderate voices, the saner voices, get blocked out. And that's what I've tried to bring across in Kalachakra.
Also the fact that, these are problems that the world is facing as of now, which is the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, which is Wahhabism,
absolutely,
where moderate Islam is being negated.
Absolutely.
The other end of the spectrum, you have Russia, and a Russia which is a remnant of the Cold War era, which is KGB guys running the show.
Correct.
And you actually have a former KGB guy, Petrov is his name, right?
That's right.
Who's there. And the CIA again is beset with its own issues and its own agendas. So I'm thinking that any loose conglomeration of spies coming together, will they ever be able to work for the benefit of the planet as opposed to their own individual nations and their own individual agendas? And you deal with that not just at one level, not at the Russian level, also at the CIA operative level, which is Judith, who's part of the IG4.
That's right. and the problem is that there are different sets of motivations which are driving all of these characters. So I mean, if you have, for example, an individual who has a spouse who has been killed by ISIS, then the set of motivations that are going to be driving that character are rather different to, let's say, the motivations of a Petrov who's simply in it for the power and the glory. But having said that, I must tell you, Rishi, I think that if you look at the world's problems today, the only way to eventually tackle them is through global cooperation. Things like, for example, climate change, or, for example, as you rightly pointed out, Wahhabism. I mean, for the better part, from the time of the founding of Islam till the time that the oil discovery happened in Saudi Arabia, Islam had actually become a rather moderate faith. It was merely a means, a path to God. It was post the discovery of oil where suddenly tons and tons of money came into Saudi Arabia, and you had a parallel situation in Egypt where you had the so-called Muslim Brotherhood using that money in order to be able to fund other ideological processes, which eventually resulted in Wahhabism getting such a major up. And in fact, India has a very important role to play because we are a land which has been known for its Sufism and its syncretic nature of religious thought. So in fact, we have a very important role to play in terms of being able to bring more sane and moderate voices to the fore. But whether it comes to climate change, whether it comes to, for example, environmental degradation, whether it comes to issues of terrorism, ideology related to terrorism, these require global cooperation. Without that, the situation is going to be very grim.
One space your query and your name to 53650. Even if you don't have a query, if you just have a comment, one space your comment on this interview, space your name to 53650. On Twitter as well as Facebook, you go to the search bar, you type HRISHIKAY. I will pop up. You could tweet out with your name, post in the timeline inbox on Facebook with your name, and facebook.com/radio1.mum, our official page. There again, any comment on this interview or anything you would like to say to Ashwin Sanghi, if you've read any of his books, enjoyed them, please let us know on the timeline inbox. Happy to read it out on air. We're going to do some messages and come back. Don't go anywhere.
94.3 Radio 1.
Well, I didn't say necessarily you have to be laudatory, but we're not complaining. Archana sent in a message saying Ashwin Sanghi's visit to your studio has happened after a long period. He should come more often. The vibe becomes reader friendly. Nice.
Thanks, Archana. You just made my day.
Ashwin's here because Keepers of the Kalachakra is out on all online as well as on ground stores, and also because this remarkable man, I have so much fun in his company. More conversation.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with HrishiK.
Radio 1.
Okay, come on now, let me be petty and clannish. I'm very glad that the principal protagonist is a Tambram from IIT. How cliched could you have got? But yeah, hurrah for my community, Vijay Sundaram.
Absolutely. No, you know...
I'm one of those blackguards who didn't go to IIT. I fought the system. But what the hell?
Have you been the better off for it? I think so.
The jury is out on that one, my friend. My parents often tend to differ, but then that's life.
Yeah. Well, pots of rasam versus pot. I mean...
Correct. Yeah, so, Vijay Sundaram, and he has a lovely fiancée, or rather a girlfriend, who are caught in this whole deluge of things happening.
Yeah, I think partly, even though I talk about concepts which are rather deep, at times very, very spiritual, but the format of what I write remains a pure and simple commercial thriller. Because I believe that I have a better chance of reaching out to an audience through a more commercial format. I mean, after all, I've done novels along with James Patterson, which are exceptionally formulaic. So, larger than life characters, you do tend to emphasize on the stereotyping of those characters. In my particular instance, I wanted someone who was rather cerebral, and not one of those physically very capable individuals, but mentally agile, And the first image that came to my mind was a Tamil engineer. I mean, so forgive the stereotyping out here, but it just lent itself to the story. And then him being pushed into a situation which he was least likely to control. As we have always seen in commercial thrillers, the first one-third you build up the anxiety, you build up the entire conflict. In the second one-third, it reaches its peak, and by the last one-third, you find a way to resolve that conflict. But how do you do that? It's by creating larger-than-life characters, and the larger-than-life is also implies that the antagonist is larger than life, the protagonist is sometimes much smaller. And that's precisely what I was trying to do.
Yeah, and what is not formulaic and what is not going by the book, I would have understood if you had a German scientist who meditates and who has an idea of Buddhism and Sanskrit, because
Yes.
at one level they
Yes.
always say that the origin of German is Sanskrit.
Yes.
But you have a Russian scientist, a Mikhailov,
Yes.
who has spent a considerable amount of time meditating, going through the mandalas and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and he has a guru. So that to me was very, very fascinating, because you would think of Russians as the polar opposite into all the dunyadari of the world.
There was a
Which translates into what's happening in Goa, with all the land grabbing and the prostitution and everything. But we have to go back to the fact that Russia and the czars of yore were really at the core of a lot of cultural uprising at the time.
Of course. But then there is this one wonderful little sentence from the second Neurotics notebook, which says that there's something in every atheist itching to believe, and there is something in every believer itching to doubt. And so all people are ultimately a bundle of contradictions. And then why go far? I mean, for example, the expeditions that happened to, for example, Mount Kailash were Russian expeditions where they were trying to discover the origins of Shambhala. So there has been a lot of, in fact, the entire
Shambhala, aka Shangri-La, some people thought.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Which has been covered in substantial detail in Keepers of the Kalachakra.
That's right.
Because there was a certain set of people who thought of Shambhala as a physical place. There were some people who thought of Shambhala as a state of mind, as a final destination in terms of your spiritual journey. And there was those who believed that it is a combination of both, that only if you are spiritually evolved can you actually attain that physical realm which is known as Shambhala. But there has been a lot of Russian involvement in that fundamental concept of Shambhala. So I would not completely write them off. In fact, I would never write them off in anything.
Well said. Audio online all across the nation, www.onecast.in, numeral 1cast.in, 94.3 on the FM band on your radio sets right here in Mumbai City. Only if you're not driving. There's some live video which has been streamed on Twitter at HRISHIKAY, tagging Ashwin Sanghi, and also on Instagram, where you can catch the live feed. The Pet Shop Boys, West End Girls, back in a couple of minutes. Pet Shop Boys, West End Girls. Ashwin Sanghi is in studio. One of my favorite authors, Keepers of the Kalachakra. Go get it. It's available on all online as well as on-ground stores. More conversation with the author.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with HrishiK.
Radio 1.
Okay, I'm just thinking that your stuff, in particular this one, just lends itself so easily to web series.
Yeah.
I mean, not just only because there are platinum blondes and things like that in the book.
Although that's one of them.
Pardon my being flippant. Well, why not? So,
Absolutely.
Are you thinking of that? Have you approached people, or has the other way the other way around happened?
No, well, many of my books are actually going into various stages of development. One of the books, of course, is my last book in the Bharat series, the Sialkot Saga, which will eventually become a web series. And currently the Krishna Key is sitting with a production house with the angle of a two-part movie. So there is a lot of stuff happening with my other books. Kalachakra discussions are going on. I do believe that
Sorry
it can
to interrupt you. Are you in a position to tell me where the Sialkot saga is going to go on? Who the production house?
Sialkot saga is with Hansal Mehta.
Okay.
So, it depends in terms of where he decides to. I love the way he looks.
He's a
at
good
stories.
man, and I hope he casts his muse, which is Rajkumar Rao.
So he's very, very good, and so I know that story is in very good hands. Kalachakra is still at the nascent stages because I believe it's cutting edge. It has the possibility of being India's Matrix. It really has that potential. But the problem is books and audio video are very, very different animals, Rishi. I think it was the famous director Alfred Hitchcock who said that the length of a movie has to be related to the endurance of the human bladder. Because you can only sit for so much time in a movie, right? Now, luckily, we now have the web format, the streaming format, which means that you can take a pee break and you can go back to binge watching. And that's what makes a lot of these stories like Kalachakra now doable. Because there was no way that you could have told this story in 2 hours and 20 minutes. Very difficult. You could tell the story, but you would end up losing out on a lot of vital elements. And that's really where now the streaming format, OTT as it were, allows us to be able to tell the story.
Just a slightly technical thing, only because I'm sure my listeners would also like to know this. Do you as a writer have to liaise with the platform or the production house? So do you go to the Netflixes of this world or the Amazon Primes of this world, or do you go to a production house like Hansal Mehta?
Yes.
So, or could it be either?
It could be either actually, but having been now in this space, the first time that I think I did an interview with you was probably around 10 years ago with the Rosabal Line.
Correct.
And in these last 10 years, what I have noticed is that it always makes sense to have a creative person spearheading a project. Because then if that person is passionate about the project, then he will see it through. I'm not saying that a production house cannot be passionate about a project, but generally that passion tends to come from an individual, like a director or a producer or a screenwriter. So it makes sense to have that happening from day one, because the chances of your story not only being eventually told, but also being told the way you want it to be told, that becomes that much more greater. The odds of that become greater.
So are there some genes at play in between all the frenetic and furious writing? Are you buying some stocks? Watching the markets?
Well, as you know, I do a non-fiction series which is known as 13 Steps.
Yeah, correct.
And one of those books...
You have a co-writer on that, don't you?
Yeah, we have co-writers for every book. So we did a book on luck. We did a book on wealth. We've done a book on marks. And now, of course, this year we have 3 more books coming out. One on bloody good sales, one on parenting, and one on health. And of course, I have been joking that no one should know that Ashwin Sanghi co-wrote the health book, because looking at Ashwin Sanghi's girth, it would be very difficult to digest any information emerging from that book. So I'm wondering as to whether I even want my name to be on the cover of that book. But anyway, long and short is that I do have to involve myself in worldly stuff, including, for example, the stock market, because of the nature of the books that I write. And ultimately, Rishi, we all need to make a living. Papi pet ka sawal hai.
Well put. We're going to come back and say bye-bye to him. A last leg of conversation up ahead. You have any comments? You have anything to say about the interview or his writing? Ashwin Sanghi, 1 space your comment, space your name to 53650 on SMS, at HrishiKay on Twitter, HrishiKay the Facebook page. Pop it on the timeline inbox and facebook.com/radio1.mum, our official page. Speaking of finance, the Bloomberg Quint Minute is up ahead, and then back with Ashwin Sanghi.
94.3 Radio 1.
Well, it's pure coincidence or accident, or as Ashwin would say in his books, well, nothing is a coincidence. Coincidence. He likes all the music on the show thus far. Bruce Springsteen, Dancing in the Dark, a last leg of conversation with the author of Keepers of the Kalachakra. It is on all on-ground as well as online stores. Ashwin Sanghi.
This is Good Morning Mumbai with HrishiK.
Radio 1.
Now, I really think that your contribution to history being used or woven into fiction is something that we need to laud you for. I mean, fantastic. And I was about to even ask you whether you studied quantum physics, or you went into that realm, because at the end of this book, through all the history that we've also seen in the Bharat series, you go into some very detailed explanations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, frankly, history as a subject has always fascinated me, even though it was taught in an extremely boring way at school. But the truth is that I have always looked at history as a story, and that's what it is, his story. And of course, in today's politically charged and gender correct environment, we should be talking about her story also, besides history. But the point is that there are two specific subjects, history and mythology, and both fascinate me almost equally. And what really excites me, Rishi, is the overlap between the two. So when I can take these two words, myth and history, and I can bring them together, then think about it. The word that is created is mystery. Myth, history, mystery. And I have always found that in some ways, myth is more truthful than history. It was the great C.S. Lewis who said that a myth is a lie that contains a truth. And history, of course, is the so-called factual accounts that we invent much later. It was George Santayana who said that history is a pack of lies about events that never happened, written by people who were never there. So the point is, what is the ultimate truth? We are going back to the words of Pilate, who asked, what is truth? So myth and history, on the other hand, tends to be a little more truthful. If we look at all the epics and the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Mahabharata went from 25,000 verses known as the Jaya to 50,000 verses known as the Bharat to 100,000 verses known as the Mahabharata. The Ramayana, there are 300 versions of the Ramayana, and these were works that we considered to be itihas. We considered them as history, not mythology. But we were willing to accept 300 versions of those historical narratives. It's unfortunate today that we have a problem accepting 2 or 3 versions of a historical narrative. Ultimately, history is a point of view, and mythology gives it a grounding. And that's what I love.
Very well said. Okay, people who have been enjoying this conversation. Arun Narayan. Hi Arun, how are you? Very sparkling morning with the witty and insightful Ashwin Sanghi and the effervescent HrishiK. Great music as always. Thank you very much, my friend. Walter Menezes, great conversation with Ashwin Sanghi, inspiring me to get back to some serious reading, amongst other things. Thank you very much. Archan Dave, listening in from my car, not entering the office till you guys are done. Great interview, you guys. Yeah, when the song plays, maybe you can shift to our online stream, which is onecast.in, and continue listening at the office, unless there's a discipline issue with HR there.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to walk out of this studio with a swollen head.
What's happening with the 13 series? You've done Wealth, you've done Luck, and one more. Marks, yeah.
And now we have 3 more, Sales, Parenting, and Health. And of course, the story behind the 13-step series is rather funny, because I had, that I hold the world record for rejections, and lots of rejections had come in for my first novel, and I was very depressed. And there used to be this Punjabi gentleman who was a friend of my dad's, and they were having a whiskey together, and he asked me why I was depressed, and I said, no one wants to publish my novel. He said, what's the problem? एक और publisher को apply कर दो. But I said, there are no publishers left. The entire list is over. So he said, Beta, remember one thing in life, 99% is about good luck. So I asked, what is the 1% about? That must be about hard work, effort, management, contacts, networking, so many other things. He said that 1%, he picked up his glass, which was half full of a Patiala peg, and he drained it down within a couple of seconds. And he said that 1% is known as bloody good luck. So that is where the series came from. 13 steps to bloody good luck. Now we are trying to demystify various other concepts within that. So the aim is basically to try and come out with maybe around 3 to 4 titles a year. and demystify subjects which people consider to be mysteries. So as usual, I'm writing
Forward to that and look forward to inviting you back into studio, since a few people have complained saying that they don't get to hear enough of you. Thank you very much for your time.
It's a
my friend.
pleasure always to have a conversation with you, Rishi. Thanks
you.
so much.
See you soon. Up ahead, what's happening at the 18th Asian Games, in particular how the Indians are faring. Lady Marmalade, 10:15, I'm HrishiK. 10:15, I'm HrishiK. 10:15, I'm HrishiK. 10:15, I'm HrishiK.